I spent 2 decades as a Fortune 500 head of HR sitting in the rooms where promotions were decided. I'm Courtney O'Connell, and I'm bringing you inside the promotion room. Today on the pod, I sit down with Patrick Sutton, who was a teen Hollywood actor turned global head of people and culture. This was such a fun conversation. We cover the idea of becoming a great storyteller to build your personal brand. And we also talk about practical tips that we would offer to ambitious professionals to get really good at mastering influence by reading the room. Without further ado, Patrick Sutton. Patrick Sutton, welcome to the promotion room.
Hi, Courtney. Thank you for having me.
I am thrilled to have you here. So, like I like to start out with all of my guests, why don't you start by telling us, where are you from? What was your first job? And what did you want to be when you grew up?
Oh my gosh. All right. So I'm from the Midwest. I'm from Chicago originally. I've lived now here. Home is Atlanta. My first job was I was an actor, and I was a teenager cast in a movie, and it was called A Time to Kill with Sandra Bullock, Matthew McConaughey.
Yeah.
It was my first job. Like, it was literally my first job.
Okay.
And it's the
Movie
whole
star
thing.
gone corporate. Help us understand exactly how that worked.
Literally, it was my first job. I had just turned 15, and I was downtown where they were shooting, and the director, Joel Schumacher, saw me walking across the late Joel Schumacher saw me walking across the street, and he ran up to me and he said, "Excuse me, this is going to be like the weirdest question I ever asked." And it kind of caught me off guard. I was like, "What?" And he was like, "Would you like to be in a movie?" And for context, for people that's listening, we had moved from Chicago to Mississippi at this time. So I still had the Chicago street smarts. So I was just like, someone's approaching me, asking me to be in a movie, this older man. I was like,
Right.
no. So I
Spidey
kept
senses.
walking. Yeah.
Yes.
So I started walking, and he says, no. We're shooting a movie here called A Time to Kill with Sandra Bullock. And of course, I still love Sandra Bullock. That caught me on my tracks. I turned back around. I said, yes. What? I don't even care what it is.
Right.
And from there, they took me over to casting, and I had a meeting with the casting assistant, who was actually the now Academy Award winner, Octavia Spencer. She was the casting assistant, and she talked to me and was telling me about what this was going to be. And needless to say, I hadn't even told my mom. I hadn't told anyone. I was like, yeah, but of course I couldn't sign anything. I had to use the phone there because, again, this is before cell phones. I called my mom at work. I says, "Hey, you're not going to believe this, Mom, but I think I'm about to be in a movie." And clearly from there, it became like the best 4 months of my life. I was on set, had a tutor, was on 48 Hours with Dan Rathers. I went to LA, was on the Lisa show, had Thanksgiving dinner with like Matthew McConaughey, Sandra Bullock. It was like a great time as a teenager.
I'm speechless. Okay, what was your first job story I have ever heard from all of my guests? So what was your role? Because now we all need to rewatch the movie and find.
Yeah. So if you watch, and I did earn my first movie film credit, and I still get my little royalty residual check. I was the cousin of Samuel L. Jackson. My credited name, I think they had me as militant teenager. I had like 8 lines, but I think only 2 made it. But I'm throughout the film because Joel Schumacher, he told my mom, he says, "Of course, Patrick's going to be here." Because my mom was like, "How is this going to work with him being here for so many months or whatnot?" He's like, "Well, he'll have a tutor, and we want to build his story with you'll see him throughout." So in the very opening of the film, you see me, if you've watched the movie or read the book, there's the 2 men that assault the young girl. They throw this beer bottle on a house. I run out of the house, and that's the first shot you see, in the camera establishes who I am. I have on this do-rag. It's very much younger me. And at the height, there's a riot. Then I set off this Molotov cocktail and I throw it. I set some people on fire. It's a whole thing, but it was one of the best moments of my teenage life. And it really did shape how showing up for work is important, because Joel Schumacher really he let me come on set even days I didn't film, on like weekends, and watch the magic and just being prepared. So all of that was And it literally was it was my very first job.
That is unbelievable. What an experience. Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So and Octavia Spencer, seriously? Like a casting
Yeah.
assistant? That is
She
like,
was the casting assistant.
that is wild. Okay. So here you are, like a semi movie star and rubbing elbows with the who's who of Hollywood. So how did you get into corporate?
So how did I get into corporate? Right. So of course, I was a teenager, obviously, and it was an exciting opportunity. And I did, of course, theater and whatnot, but it wasn't the full calling, especially once I got to college. And once I got to college, I did major in English, loved English literature. And I did for a short stint do a campus film, and I went to NYU film program for a couple of weeks in the summer. But I still didn't feel like it was too hard, like wanting to decide if that was going to be the journey for me. Like, do I want to really pursue this sitting on set for 12, 13 hours? Then will I really make it? Some of that started to come in as I got older, but it really wasn't until I finished college and my first job when I moved to Atlanta was working at a telecommunications company, and they needed sort of an HR generalist person. And I could pretty much present well because, again, the whole acting piece, a
Oh,
little bit of
yeah.
that still kind of followed me, and being able to
Yeah.
put presentations together. And I got an opportunity to do it, and I showed up really well in that moment. And so I can't remember Dorothy's last name, but she was the HR manager that took that chance on me, and I got it. And from there, that became part of my career. I was like, I want to be able to do something where I'm speaking with people. I want to be able to develop. And then that's where I got into learning and development. And then from there, the whole cycle of learning and development, then I went into sort of HR, people operations, and then talent management and development. And I actually like talking a little bit about my early start, just because you just never know how transferable skills can still show up even all these years later. I feel like it helps because as we talk, you have to be engaging, that executive presence and being able to connect with people. I feel like some of that is from the theater, not being overly dramatic from theater, but just being able to connect with people.
Well, and being able to emote and project a presence, right? We'll get it because I love that you mentioned executive presence. I definitely want to dive into that. But we all have a brand, right? I mean, whether we know it or not, we all and by brand, it's a reputation. So when people say our name in rooms that we're not in, what comes to mind, right? That's our
Yeah,
brand. And so I do think that there is something to be said for the theater background and doing some acting, not that you're playing a role, but you start to really understand how to communicate well. And that's
absolutely.
such an important part. But I'm curious about, so English major, it sounds
Hmm.
like you sort of fell into HR, which a lot of us did. That was certainly
Yes.
my path. And I guess there are at least back then, now I know there are actual HR majors and people coming into the field on
Yes.
purpose. But I feel
Hmm.
like way back when that was never even an option. A lot of us fell into HR for all the divine reasons that it happened. But when you were a kid, what did you want to be? It doesn't sound like an actor potentially, right? Because it sounds like the Hollywood thing just sort of was thrust on you.
Wanted to be a writer. Coincidentally, I
Oh,
literally wanted to be a writer. I'm an only child. And so, of course, big imagination. So I remember when my mom got me a word processor, I remember I would type all these fictional stories. And Courtney, you're going to so laugh at me. And you're going to be like, how did you know at 10 years old? I wanted to be a soap opera writer. I wanted to write for soap operas. My grandma, she loved All My Children, One Life to Live. And so I would be there seeing her get so excited about them. And so I was like, I would just write these imaginary stories for it. And, of course, and I feel like this is important to share. Unfortunately, my grandmother was diagnosed with cancer, and it took over her pretty bad. And so she couldn't really watch her soaps anymore. So what I told my mom, and my mom will tell the story too, I started writing sort of like stories, and I would just read them out to my grandmother so she could still feel like she was getting her stories. I was like, oh, I'm going to be a soap writer.
I'm
That was
so
going
good
to
at
be
this.
my
Yeah.
thing.
What a
That was going to
gift.
be my thing.
Yeah. So when did you veer away from this? So then you majored in English, maybe were you
Mhm.
still thinking at the time, I'm going to be a writer?
The passion was still there. And it wasn't really until, so I went to undergrad, I went to Tougaloo College, which is in Mississippi. So we stayed in
Yep.
Mississippi. But
Yep.
then Tulu has a program where you can do sort of like a exchange student
Yeah.
program.
Yeah.
And they had one with Brown University. And so my French teacher, Miss Mary Davis, I still remember her name. She said, Patrick, you should go to Brown. She was like, I'm going to nominate you for the program. She's like, I think you'd be great. I go to Brown. I was at a small liberal arts college with about 1,000 students, then going to Brown University with thousands.
Yeah.
They had the Rights and Reason Theater there. I performed at the Rights and Reason Theater, and I got to meet they had their career days were exceptional. So I remember talking to people from ABC News and wanting to find out, like, what's it like to be a reporter, an anchor person? And just hearing at the time as a college student, hearing all of the grunt that it takes to be what it would take, I was like, nope, this is not going to be it for me. I'm not going to do it. But
Mhm.
I loved being able to use it as a hobby. Even at my junior
Yeah.
year of college, I was like, I'll probably still just write. But I was thinking maybe I might be a lawyer, maybe I'll go to law school, or maybe I'll be an English professor. It was literally one of those two. So it transitioned from all of that, really based off of some of the conversations I heard at that career day. I was like, well, maybe that's not the path I'm going to go.
So glad you shared it because I think, especially for young people, there's a lot of pressure. I have a son who just graduated from high school, and these kids now have to declare a major before they even start school in the fall. And I'm dating myself. I mean, I don't remember having to declare a major until well into a semester or
Sophomore
two.
year. I think I had sophomore year to declare
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean,
my
there's a lot of
major.
pressure to come on, kids, get on it, get it
Yeah.
decided. I had a stint in media as well. I had an internship at CNBC in New York when I was in college because I was a communication major and I thought, this is what I want to do. This just sounds great. And so like the glitz and glam of broadcast television. And I was an intern in the CNBC Primetime Media Relations Group. And I worked with Geraldo. Now I'm really dating myself. And I used to have to walk behind Geraldo and carry his suit jacket as his little intern. And I don't know what it was about it because it was a really cool internship. I hated it. Like I knew almost immediately this is not the career for me. And
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't really articulate why at the time. Now, of course, 30 years later, I understand that I needed to be in a career where I was connecting with people on a more
Yeah.
meaningful basis. Like that is just what I needed to be doing. And I got led into that, which is I'm grateful for that. But the point is, I think it's really important for people to just go out there, try it, have the conversations, go to the career fairs, ask the questions. What is a life like
Yeah.
this really like? Because learning what you don't like is as important as getting to do the stuff that you love. Because now you get to shrink that
Absolutely.
funnel of opportunity.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh. I didn't know you had to define it like right now. I
Isn't
couldn't
it
even,
strange? Yeah.
the pressure of trying.
There's a lot of pressure. And so, which kind of leads us into our conversation, because of course, my audience are high achieving corporate folks who really want to have the edge. And what do I need to do to really get ahead? And that's why I love these conversations with corporate execs like you, where it's like your journey, because there's so much to learn from those who have gone before us. So how can
Mhm.
we pay it forward by saying, hey, don't make these
Absolutely.
mistakes that I made? And then also the seat you're in, the seat that I left when I left corporate as the head of HR, we have a very interesting vantage point where we can say, let me kind of bring you into the promotion room, if you will, right? So like, here's how things
Mhm.
are really going down. There are so many
Absolutely.
people who are so heads down, so laser focused on flawless execution that they're not thinking about the things that really, really matter if you aspire to move up quickly throughout their career.
Absolutely.
So for you, okay, so you start to narrow down what you want, fell into HR, which again,
Yes.
how amazing. It's a talk to us about like that career journey for you. I'd love to really understand like what now that you look back, what did it take for you to succeed? What do you think it was really boiled down to?
Wow, that's a powerful question and just a moment of reflection for me. I think
Yeah.
about the journey of where it took for me to get there. I think it was probably a little bit 2008 was a good year for me because I was a consultant. I was a people solution consultant. And of course, if anyone that remembers 2008, there was like the recession. A lot of the projects that I was on were projects where we were coming in basically cutting. There were going to be lots of cuts happening to people. So how do you change, how will you still get the work knowing that you're going to be cutting workforces? And I remembered being on these projects And the project manager that we had was very much like you go in, you execute, you deliver, da, da. And I understood that part, but I still felt I'm people solutions consultant. The human part too, like you have to demonstrate that empathy. That has to be and I remembered how that made me feel as far as you were having the conversations with HR leaders about
Mhm.
the workforce cuts and how the processes were going to be changing across the business. And I remembered she was the senior director of HR. Can't think of Ellen's last name, but I do. It's funny how 2008, that was a long time ago.
Yeah.
I just remember Ellen, and I remember when we had the conversation I was assigned to her as a people solutions consultant.
Mhm.
She says the way that you've been here. I was on the project for about 3 months. She says you've been a partner, and I know that this is your job, but you don't show up to the team as you don't seem like one of the guys from the consultant because you really are trying to connect with the people because you understand what's happening. And from that moment, it was a defining moment for me I said, I want to do something where I am really going to make a difference in corporate and in the HR space. But I really wanted to kind of do because she loved her team and making those decisions about who was not going to be able to move forward and not like it. I remember the emotions she felt and just really trying to be there as much as I could as a, consultant, knowing I have a job to do and she has a job to do.
Yeah.
And from that moment, after I transitioned out of that consulting company, my role then, I was sort of managing people on the learning and development side. And I remember it was my old professor, the late Dr. Jerry Ward. He was such an inspiration to me as an
Yeah.
English professor.
Yeah.
He said, and I know you've heard this, the cliche, if you find a career or job path that you love, you'll never work a day in your life.
Yeah.
Remember that
Yeah.
whole
Yeah.
statement?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I remembered that was my mantra. If I can interact with people and I can make people just love to do good work. And if I can, knowing that when I get home, I know I've given it 100% and I feel good about myself and what I'm doing,
Mhm.
then that's the best experience for me. And so when I joined that company, as I mentioned, as I was leading learning and at the height of, I think we had just started doing YouTube, introducing that into your trainings and stuff. I loved the work that I was doing and it never felt like, I hate this or I hate this moment. And from that moment on, I says, this is the space I want to be in. I always want to be in a space that really connects with people. And HR has changed. It's
Yeah.
evolved tremendously. But at the heartbeat of it all, it's people, how you treat people. Then that's the core of what matters to me. So I'm really not even working. I'm doing something I absolutely love, which is,
Wow.
talent and being able to help people hopefully get to the next level or at least thrive in the role that they're in.
Yeah. It's so inspirational. And I think it is aspirational for a lot of people because I'm sure, like you, I talk to a lot of people who feel like their work is soul sucking and I don't want to be doing this and there's got to be something better. And I want to reach those people as well because there is a better way. We
Yeah.
all have agency and I don't want to be flippant about it because I know it's a tough economy. I know we are in the AI boom and jobs are being impacted. We know that. And so I do talk to a lot of people who feel like they don't have agency right now. They have to just keep plugging with these kind of the soul sucking work. So I'm curious if you have any advice for those people. So you have been able to find the sweet spot of this company, this job, this point in your life and what really fulfills you and lights you up because that also ebbs and flows as you go through your life. We have different
Still
needs and
there.
different, we are not that our values change, but what we value in the moment can
Hmm.
change.
Absolutely.
So what advice would you give to somebody who is like, oh man, Patrick, I hear that I want that so badly. How do I get it?
I think to be honest, and such a great question, and just people want to hear the truth, and this is the honest truth to what you have to do is, and I know I feel like I'm making these sort of comparisons with literature or writing. You're the author of your book. You are
Yes.
in control of your story, and I understand, and I've had moments of where I've been there too, like what am I doing? And I just, the great recession of 2008 and 9, when it
Yep.
was kind of like, what
Yep.
happens and where do I go? But understanding that you're the author of your story, but also you can't just hold the book. You've got to tell people about it. So you've got to really tell people what your interests are, who you are, and don't let it you have to find that community. And community looks different in all kinds of spaces. And definitely a larger community now because we have so much technology.
Yeah.
There's so many social groups you can join for
Yeah.
different things, HR groups or just engineering groups. There's just so many groups. Finding your community, telling your story, getting practice makes perfect. Not all of us enjoy like your communications major and
Mhm.
done that work. Not everyone has the gift of being able to present and
Mhm.
say, hey, look at me, or I have an interest in this. But
Mhm.
practice makes perfect. We've got to stand in front of that mirror. We've got to start to have your 60-second elevator pitch. You never know. I always joke and say, what if you were on an elevator with that person that could change your life? You got 60 seconds. Who are you? How do you add value? What's your story? Give me your story in 60 seconds. Think about that. And so listeners, audience, as you listen to Courtney's podcast and what's happening here, ask yourself, what's my story? Who and what do I want it? What do I want my book to say? How do I show up and remain vigilant and sort of just the resilience of it all? And understand that even in a book, every chapter looks a little bit different. There's going to be those unknown moments. There's going to be a little uneasiness, but think about the end of that book when it's that ending of, man, I finally came out of all of this stuff that brought me to where I'm at now. So find your community, practice being able to talk about where you are and what you're looking to do. And again, just practice it and network. And I know, and don't make it so transactional either. There's an art to it. But we're all a work in progress too. So make the goal to be 1% better every day or 10% better every week. But I think those are some key essential things you've got to be able to be willing to do. Get out of your comfort zone. Tell people who you are. I'm Patrick Sutton. I'm a creative HR leader. I have dibbled and dabbled in lots of things, and I want to find out how can I help you? Or this is what I can do that can help you. Think about that too, listeners. Think about how can I help this organization or help this person take their department or their company to the next level.
I have chills. And you just said so much. I think we need to listeners go back 10 seconds 10 times and listen to that again because there was just so much there, right? It was learn to tell your story. Ironically, I have a coach who told me just this week to go buy the book Story Brand for this exact reason. Because what we have to understand about humans is that we all relate to story. And I'm not a natural storyteller. I don't fancy myself as good at that end. We all have to know how to communicate in a
Yes,
compelling way, and especially aspirational high achievers in corporate. If you're not an excellent communicator, that's something that's definitely a focus. Owning your path, taking accountability and responsibility. Because I have worked with people in the past, and not typically my clients. My clients are pretty aggressive about I'm going to do this, but when I was corporate, a lot of people who felt a sense of entitlement. I've been in this job for 5 years. It's my turn. Why? This isn't fair, right? And it's just kind of that sense of entitlement of well, what are you doing? Or to your point, are you communicating to people what you want? What do you want your next step to be? Because you're doing great. So we all assumed you're happy. So it's no one's a mind reader. So I think the whole idea of being able to communicate and then that elevator pitch, man, it is underrated. People have got to nail that and practice it and workshop it. And it sounds, I do get some pushback sometimes oh, this just sounds so engineered and so inauthentic. And it's anything but. The point is, most of us are not great on our feet and charismatic and like a Tony Robbins, where we're just going to say and do the right thing all the most of us have to learn how to do this well. And so if you're going to say that's not me, so therefore it's not authentic, you got to shift the mindset a little because we're all
absolutely.
students here. And these are some of the non-negotiables.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. So tell us about your most difficult career pivot, right? So that the first career pivot in my mind is when you are an individual contributor and then you get promoted to manager and now you're managing people. Maybe sometimes you're managing your former peers, and then the next career pivot, managing managers, or maybe moving into the executive rank. Maybe it was moving to a different company with a new culture. But when you think about your career, what was the most difficult pivot for you?
I think, Courtney, the most difficult pivot for me was being able to work in the startup culture. I
Mm,
was very used to, you know, I was very suit and tie. I was very suit and tie. And then I had a career pivot per se because, I call it the great recess, meaning when COVID happened in 2020.
Yeah.
And I found myself without a job because, things were changing and
Yep.
I had to figure out what does next look like for me because I'd been at an organization for almost a decade. And that was kind of who I was because I was like, I'm just going to be here. I'm going to grow. I was the director. I was like, I'm sure in a few years I'll be a VP. Like my picture was going to go on the wall. It wasn't the story in the book. And, it changed. And so I found myself working in a startup, a hyper growth startup that was on the path of becoming an IPOing and great. But I was in an environment where I was somewhat I was the more experienced person in my team. So a lot of my peers were 10, 15 years younger than me. And I remember making a reference about Friends, the TV show with Jennifer Aniston, and they were like, what? And I was like, okay, I get it. But it was a great learning experience for me as a people leader and being able to understand, especially when we look at the future of work and tying it back into just talent development and management. I was now sort of in an environment where my peers were a lot younger, but they were moving extremely fast. And so I had to really turn up being able to be adaptable and to pivot in how things operated. And in the startup world versus the traditional corporate world that I was used to, you have the stakeholder buy-in, you do the presentation. It normally takes a good 6 or 8 months, but in startup world, it's what's happening this week. You need to execute strategy. Boom, boom, boom. And there were moments of, imposter syndrome. And I was like, oh my gosh, am I getting it? But I said, you know what I have to do is I got to lean into my peers here and talk to them and understand. And so I started to connect and understand where they were coming from as a 27, 30-year-old in this environment where a lot of them, this is what they know, being in San Francisco or Silicon Valley and tapping into how can I lean into this. And then I thought, you know what? I'm a creative. That's the skill I got to lean into with this. This is how I connect with them. And this is how I will lead some of these strategies and initiatives and move faster is because I've got to find a way to turn it on that makes sense for them. And once I did that, Courtney, I felt unstoppable because I understood how they looked at careers. They looked at careers a little bit different, and I think for us, we used to, or at least I used to think you would get at one organization and probably be there for 30, 40 years, depending. That's not how they were thinking. They were like, no. But I was coming off of a path of where I thought I was going to be that. And they were like, no, we're in here. We're going to, hopefully the company goes IPO. We're probably going to start our other thing or we're going to move here. And I was like, what? What are you guys doing?
Yeah.
But I was like, I understood that it was the passion of the work and how they were building things. And it made me want to become like that builder. And so now I feel like the skills that I have, and when I talk about I do mentor others and the younger people in their professional careers. It's about let the work inspire you. Don't go in thinking, oh, I'm going to be here for 20, 30 years. You can't really think like that anymore. But think about how do I add value for where I'm at for now? How do I build that agency and my name? How do I show up? How do I want people to say my name in those rooms long after I've left, which goes into the framework that I always say, back in, 2020, everyone was looking for the unicorn, right? Just like, oh, I'm looking for the next unicorn. And I remember having a call with a recruiter back then. I said, I'm not a unicorn because a unicorn is that bright, shiny thing that's for the moment. Instead, I want my work and who I am. I want to be a legend because it's the legends that we remember. The unicorn is it's in for the moment. It's unique. It's there. But think about the work that you're doing, Courtney. You're building a legacy. Your work, people will be talking about it for years to come. The unicorn is the trend. What's in today could be gone tomorrow. So I always lean into be a legend in your leadership. Be a legend in the work that you want to do. Don't think about, oh, let me just do something for the moment because that burns out really fast. Think about the legacy you want to tell in your career and run with it.
Love that. And there's so much self-awareness that's required there. And so kind of this kind of theme pulled through that I really love about this is you've got to decide what you want out of your life. Who do you want to be when you really grow up, right? Right. I mean, because this is, we can't just let the years tumble one after the other, because then we wake up and it's time to retire and we're like, wait, like I didn't even
Yeah.
choose to be here. And maybe this isn't what I would have chosen. And there are some maybe who the idea of being a unicorn is like, holy crap, that's it. That's what I want. And if that is your calling, and amazing, go be, because we need the
Yeah.
unicorns in the world, right?
We do need the unicorns.
Yeah. And I also, this idea of simmering into, like, really just start getting more deliberate, because if you want to be the unicorn, that's amazing. And the advice and mentoring that you and I would give to somebody like that is going to be different than the person who is a bit more grounded and wants to kind of play the long game. That's a very different. And the point
Very
is,
different.
this is why I love my work, is because I get to work with and talk to and interview such amazing, interesting snowflakes, right? Like, we are all so unique, and what drives us all is so different. Another thing that you said, and I wrote this down while you were talking. You said something about with the peers at the startup who were working in a very different way than you were brought up to work and think, but you understood what motivated them. And you realized that you had to kind of click into what's their motivation so that I can now better influence, right? And so what I wrote down is read the room, learn how to read the room, because you came from large structured corporate where things move a bit slower. There's a very sophisticated process for most everything. And we show up and we're buttoned up, to a scrappy, fast moving, 80% is good enough because we got to go. Otherwise, our competitor is going to be right in front of us. Startup. And so there had to be that moment where you're like, it's like when in Rome, right? Like, I gotta fit in to survive here in terms of how we are thinking and doing work. So tell me your thoughts about, like, because I talk a lot about this in my work, about this whole notion of read the room. I mean, like, because at the end of the day, it's all about influence, right? Influencing ideas, influencing others to think a certain way about you. Again, because we are the reputation that we make is not because we nailed a project one time. It's the 50 times that I've shown up in front of you that you are now aggregating. That's my reputation. So reading the room is important there, and learning how to connect with people based on how they need to be connected to. And so I'm curious, like, even in your work now and coaching the folks that you coach, what's your take on that? And how do you help advise people to get good at reading a room to be more influential?
Some of my methods are a little unconventional, Courtney. So
Okay.
So I
Cool.
always I joke with, especially the people that I mentor. I always say, I'm a Gemini. If for anyone that follows astrology, so that's the twins, it's the duality. And I always say, I think it helps me to be able to, how you turn it on, turn it off, and reading the room. Who do I kind of need to be to hopefully connect and make something happen here? And I remember I remember having a presentation years ago where I remembered my leader had told me, and I can say his name because we're still good friends, George Dunn, who is probably one of the best teachers and leaders that I've been fortunate enough to share space and work with. I remember him telling me about just that, reading the room, and he used an analogy of baseball because he used to coach his son's baseball team or something. He was just like, you got to go into the game. You're going into the game. You want to win. That's the thing. You know that you're going in to win.
Yeah.
But it's all about that first pitch. It's not who you're trying to strike out, but it's the first pitch. So you look across the room, and generally you start with, how will I open this up that's going to bring everyone together, that's authentic to you and to the people. And so usually when I go into a room, especially I'll say for talent piece, there was a particular moment where we were going to be talking about talent, and it had happened the day after the Oscars. And I use the fact that for the Oscars, they start planning for the next year's Oscar right after they have that one. So it takes a whole year. So you're starting to plan already.
Yeah.
Using that, and I started out with in this meeting of executives, I said, "Did you all know?" And they were like, leaning in. I said, "Did you know that the Academy Awards, they start preparing for the next year's Academy Award the very next day after? So that's a whole year. That's how we've got to think about our talent, because we want to bring the top talent, those best leads and those supporting actors and those supporting employees that are coming behind them. And because the Oscars had just come on Sunday night, some people either saw it or heard about it, whatever. In the room of the leaders in there, I saw the head nods. I saw the smile. Some people like, Yeah. It was connecting. We're talking about talent. We're
See,
going to be talking.
this is the importance of story, people, right? Like you now their ears are like poop. Like I want to understand what you're saying. Like that's powerful.
They're
That's
here.
awesome.
And that's what you have to do. I think
Yeah.
when you're going into the room or being able to have that presentation, you've got to find a way to connect. And
Yeah.
if it's a morning meeting, you can't go in a morning meeting, especially if you're the person that's gonna be, pitching. You can't go in less than 10. You've got to go in with the energy because people you get that 1 minute in the room to get their attention, to get the buy-in, to make them lean into what you're saying. And then you just have to keep going. And if it's an afternoon meeting, I think sometimes you have to go up even more because they've had lunch. So
Yeah.
you got to really bring it, but you just got to find a way to connect. And it's okay as a professional to use some current events that are, of course, respectable, but kind of can tie in to get people to be like, where is this going? Just like the Academy Awards, comparing it with talent. Where's this going? There's a need for us to plan a year ahead because we're looking at talent for the whole year. Who will be here? Who do we need to put into these seats? Who should we be looking at? Who are we planning to prep to take this new role? It's the same way, and just find that and lean into that in that conversation.
Love that. I love that. So speaking of talent and succession planning, because of course, as a former HR exec, you and I have in common sitting in those rooms and talking about a couple of things that I think maybe people would find interesting. One of them is before we even talked about people, we're talking about capabilities. So here's the direction our business is moving in strategically. So here are the key capabilities and skills that we need our workforce to have. Now we're not talking about Jane and Sally and Jim. We're talking about this is what people need to do. And then we start thinking about, okay, does our workforce have that? How do we make sure that they're there? And what's interesting right now, and I know I mentioned AI before, but what I'm finding now is that some of the most important skills are human relation skills. It is empathy. It is influence. It is the ability to communicate and influence well, because AI can't take that over. And we still need humans. I mean, the bots are not taking everything, right? But we know some jobs already are being cannibalized.
Yeah.
And that's fine. There's some efficiencies there. We all have to retool. But when we think about what is going to set somebody apart in the workforce of the future, this is why I really am so passionate about get really good at communicating well, positioning yourself well. Stop looking at this as a political, weird, slimy, cringy thing and start looking at it as hard skills that are required for the future. But getting back to my question, sorry, I get passionate about
No,
this.
no, I love it. I love it.
But I would love to know from you, when you are looking at any workforce, what stands out to you? What is it about somebody for you that makes them really stand out?
So I think it goes back to where I said the communication part. You owning your own agency and not just having heads down, but saying, hey, the person that will see you on the elevator or may be in that meeting or reaches out and say, hey, Patrick, do you have 15 minutes? Or because I always say everyone has 15 minutes. You always have 15 minutes to want to talk. And that person says, hey, I kind of have an interest in this. I can say, this person reached out. They have an interest in this and I've given them some guidance and they followed up and they've done X, Y, and Z. You've got to be able to really, you have to pitch yourself, even when you're in role, pitching yourself for the next role. You're going to do good work, but you can't just assume everybody knows that you're doing this great work. Yes, there's the annual performance review, but then if you have your check-in points I know some companies are hybrid, some are fully remote, but literally take the time to build that sort of personal advocates for you at the workplace. Reach out, tell people, hey, I helped XYZ work on this project and what I learned from it was this. And I'm really excited about it because I think hopefully in a year or two, I'll be able to move into this. Or you know what? Courtney, how did you get into this role? I'm sort of interested in this role and I kind of see how what you do kind of correlates a little bit to what I do. Do you think I'd be able to do this? It's being able, it goes back to, like you said, the communication piece. I look for the person who is advocating for themselves, but have built a community of other people that are advocates in the room, not the person that just feels like I'm going to stay behind the scenes and they're just going to, because if you don't say anything, sometimes you can make the assumption that this person they love what they do. They've never said, I want to do anything more. And if I'm your manager and we're having those one-on-ones weekly, monthly, or whatever, take that time and tell me that. Because if you don't, I'm going to assume you're good. You're
Yeah,
fine.
yeah. And I love that you bring up advocates. I talk about advocacy as sponsorship. So do you have sponsors in the organization? And I see a difference between a mentor and a sponsor. A
Yeah,
mentor
I do too.
is typically somebody one or two steps ahead of where you're trying to get, who's giving you advice. A sponsor is something very different. A sponsor is more of an advocate, right? And a sponsor is not a formal relationship, but this is somebody who has gotten to know you, who can see your capability, and who is senior enough that they're in the room. So when the doors are closed, okay, Patrick, I know has seen what I'm capable of. I feel really proud of what he's witnessed in terms of my work output, because you still have to be excellent at your day job, people, right?
Yeah.
Like it's not like go schmooze and you're right on, right? Like
You're in. Right.
you've got to be excellent at your day job. And I love what Patrick, like you've got to let people know what you want. And I also have to say, because again, you and I both under the HR umbrella, people listening really should take advantage of their HR and their talent teams in terms of like, get to know them, reach out to them, make sure they know who you are, make sure they know what you're interested in doing, because they're in the rooms with the decision makers. And so when your name comes,
100%.
right? Like this is a group of people, and too few people used to. There were handfuls of people who were on my calendar every quarter. I could count on them showing up. They wanted to just update me on what they're working on. They wanted to hear what was kind of coming down the pike strategically, what was keeping me up, and like a really smart conversation and fun.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Like set those meetings up, peeps. Like reach out to your HR team, because that's can be a powerful advocate.
And make sure too that as you're doing that, I mean, as we were talking about AI, there's so many tools to help you. Like if you're like, well, what do I say?
Yeah.
You can get 2 to 3 really good questions. Like you just said, what are you working on? Or you can't, because one of the things that it's a pet peeve of mine, and I want people to remember this, because you may not meet me per se, but someone else. I hate dead air. I hate when it's just dead silence. Like know what the purpose is. Hey, I'm so glad I was able to get these 15 minutes with you. I want to talk to you about this. How's your day? Make it needs to work. Don't let it feel painful, because they're going to be like, oh my gosh, I don't ever want to talk to this person
Right.
again.
They
So
expected
think
me to
about
lead
that,
the whole
people.
conversation that they set up.
Right.
This is annoying.
Right.
Everybody's
Don't
busy.
do
Everyone
that.
has 15 minutes, but not 15 minutes to waste. So
Correct. Yes.
how do you define executive presence? We have a lot of clients who are doing great at their job, and they're like, okay, but my manager told me I have to work on my executive presence, and I don't know what that means. So what do I do? So what is it to you? How do you when you see it?
I know it when I see it, because again, I've been on the other side of that too, to where I've had to get the coaching, and where it's the uncertainty about a delivery or something, or I wanted to, or I just thought, or something. There has to be a certain level of confidence in your delivery. You've got to kind of execute that, you know where you stand. Even if you don't know something, don't fuddle with it. Just like, that's a good point. I don't, and it's okay to say I don't know, but I'm going to get back to you. I'm going to say that with confidence. Don't let it be the thing where you don't get stage fright. And I hate that I'm going back to the theater part, but sometimes the stage fright kills the executive presence. You've got to really be able to, sometimes I think it is a little bit of an inflection. I think it's practice too, like looking in the mirror, like having the conversation, how you want to sort of command that you're in the room and what you're here to talk about, providing a clear example of, we're here to talk about the following things. There will be, it's really how your shoulders are up straight. It's also looking at your body language too. You can't go in kind of like, I don't know, because all of it gets looked at. And even if you're working 100% remote and on a computer, that can translate the same way. You've got to be sort of like camera ready and ready to exude in what you're telling me. And I need to believe that you are the person that can do it. If you're telling me, if you're like, oh, I don't know, if you leave me questioning several things within 5 minutes of the conversation, it makes me less sure that you're the person that's going to be able to help me be successful. So I want people to think about executive presence. It's kind of wearing multiple hats all at once, because it's how your posture is, commanding in your tone and your delivery and your your conversation, making the eye contact and not using, if there's something you don't know, don't let that I gotcha moment or I didn't think knock you all the way down. Just, just be like, I probably missed that, or I need to find a little bit more information on it. But also, if you say you're going to do it, please make sure you do it.
Yeah.
I've had people say, oh, I'm going to get back to you. And 2 weeks have passed and they have not gotten back to me. And that really is very telling. And I mean, that's something that has happened and you can really lose your credibility. And that also contributes to executive presence too, because I feel like I can't really trust you because you didn't say what you said you were going to do.
Right. It's when I think about promotional decisions, it's a risk decision, right? Because none of us have done the role before we get the role, right? So when we promote somebody or somebody promotes us, it's a show of confidence, right? Like we are taking this risk on you because we believe you can do it. So therefore, there is that element of trust that you have to build up. And there is nothing that erodes trust quicker than lack of integrity, right? Which is doing what you say you're going to do. So be integral to your word. Otherwise, it doesn't matter how excellent a communicator you are. If you don't follow through on a commitment, that's a non-starter. Sure. Yeah. So I'm curious about when I talk to my guests, I'm talking with senior people, right? So we've got a long career to look back at all the successes and the things that we're proud of and things that we are regret or whatever. I'm curious, when you look back over your career, what advice would you have loved to have give yourself, or what advice do you wish that you had? If you think about 10 years into your career, what's the advice that if you could pick up the phone and call Patrick 10 years in, what would you tell him?
And it goes back to a theme that we've been saying is trust yourself. I think that was a lot of things too that it didn't derail my career by any means, but probably the first 10 years, there was a lot of like self-doubt, trust. Is this right? Does it feel right? Versus I would make the decision. Then I would like, did I make the right decision? Versus just trust yourself. Trust who you are and trust that, everything for myself, everything is gonna be okay is important too. But the biggest part of advice that I think, even for myself and for others, is trust yourself. You've got to trust yourself first before you ask someone else to trust you. And I say that in the context of you got to believe that you are the person that you said you were. No one else can define that for you. That's why it goes back to owning your own agency and your brand. Trust. Once you have that within you, like I know who Patrick Sutton is. And because I know who I am, nothing can sort of nothing gets in my way in present day. Cause I'm like, I know who I am. I know what I bring to the table, so I would just tell myself, Patrick, trust yourself. Just trust and it'll work out. And that's what I say to myself and to those listening. Just trust. It's all about trusting yourself.
I love that advice. I love that. All right. So I always wrap up my last question because I love to read and my bookshelves are teeming over with books, self-help, business. Give me your favorite.
Okay. Well, coincidentally, because the former English major here, I have tons of books and I'm rereading for the second time Let Them by Mel Robbins. I bought it in March and I read it. And then some things have happened kind of professionally and personally, like some things with my neighbors and stuff like this, some noise. I was like, I need to read this Let Them book again because certain things from the book, you've got to sometimes just let people be. And so I just restarted 2 nights ago, I started rereading Let Them. And that's in my wheelhouse. And my second book, I'm sorry, this is a goodie classic. I've read it in my book club. I used to be in a book club, many years ago. But The Four Agreements by Miguel Ruiz. He talks about four agreements. And one, you kind of spoke on it about the integrity part, be a person of your word. And that's one of the four agreements. And so I keep that book right by my computer. It's kind of like my little mantra book that I'll pick up because it's an easy read. It's not even, I don't think it's 100 pages, but it's the four agreements. And if you sort of follow those four agreements, you'll be okay in anything. So Four Agreements is definitely, it's a classic. 15 years I've been reading that book and picking it up. But most recently that I'm rereading again, Let Them by Mel Robbins.
Classic. Patrick, thank you so much. It has been a pleasure and I appreciate all of the value and all of the nuggets. So thank you for joining us in the promotion room.
Thank you for having me. I've enjoyed myself so much today, Courtney. Thank you.
Thanks for joining me inside the promotion room, and be sure to follow the show so you never miss an episode. Cheers to your success.